Hi, welcome back to Season 4 of the Tummy Team Journey. I am Kelly Dean, physical therapist and founder of the Tummy Team, and I'm your host. This is the podcast where we talk about how investing in your functional core and pelvic floor strength can actually change your life. So let's get started. All right, welcome everybody. This is Kelly Dean at the Tummy Team and the Tummy Team Journey podcast. And this episode is with Christina Trautman again, and she is a pelvic floor PT that a colleague of mine. We worked in the same clinic. We teach classes together. We collaborate on lots of things. And our initial topic today was going to talk about pregnancy and core and pelvic floor, which we will do another time because we are making a quick change and we are actually going to talk about pelvic floor symptoms when you are sick. Because and just extreme circumstances and what that looks like in our pelvic floor, and really talking about that because we got on this call and Christina shared with me that she's on week 5 of bronchitis. So we started us on a whole conversation that I feel like everybody wants to know about. And the thing is, when we're in allergy season, when we have the flu, when we have bronchitis, and all of a sudden our pelvic floor starts to fail us and we panic. What is going on? Or when we are a pelvic floor PT or a pelvic floor fitness instructor and we get on a trampoline and have a problem. Like, what is that information telling us? Because it's easy for people to say, oh, it's normal. But is it normal or is there something else? So welcome back, Christina. Thanks for doing the quick shift.
Yeah, no problem.
And so share a little bit about like what we were just talking about before we came on about the pelvic floor and like where you are in this illness for yourself and what it's looked like for you and what you've tried to do, and then kind of how you've tried not to panic about it.
Okay. So yeah, 5 weeks ago, my son coughed for the 15th time in my eyeballs and I eventually got sick. And it's been a really nasty one. Immediately, anytime I get sick, it goes right to my lungs. I've had bronchitis and pneumonia several times, a lot when I was a kid. And I think I got resistant to antibiotics actually from being on so many different ones. And maybe wasn't appropriately given them. Anyway, so yeah, kind of knew almost immediately that I was going to have this really deep cough, coming deep in my lungs. And the first week I was super sick, did not feel great, but I was kind of doing okay from a pelvic floor standpoint. And then week 2, I went on antibiotics to see if it would help. And I'm also doing all of my natural stuff, right? Taking like 25 supplements, which sucks because I'm the only one in the house that's like super sick. Aaron doesn't take a thing and he doesn't get sick, which just annoys me. But anyway, but then like 3rd week happens. I'm on prednisone now, which my doctor's like, oh, this will kick it, doesn't. It improves my symptoms drastically, but now I've been coughing significantly for 3 weeks. I start leaking a little bit. And it kind of brings a little PTSD back for me because my first symptom as a human in terms of the pelvic floor stuff was leaking when I was about 7 or 8 years old with sneezing and coughing, but mostly with laughing. And I just sort of remember the like embarrassment with the leaking, right? Like even when people say, oh, I just leaked, but it's a little dribble, but your underwear is wet and then you just don't feel comfortable. Now you feel like vulnerable. And then maybe it leaked into your like leggings a little bit and you're out with your girlfriends and it's just really uncomfortable and you just feel icky. And then you kind of go in this like mental spiral. Now, obviously being a pelvic floor PT, I know that this is so common and it's so, I don't want to say the word normal because that's probably not the best word to use, but Yeah, like it
explainable.
makes sense. I've been coughing hard for 3 weeks. And so, I mean, I can feel my bladder drop almost every single time. And I'm really trying to like, come up, use my core, use my pelvic floor when I can. But sometimes you get in fits and you just start coughing, and then you can just feel that little bit of leaking. And so, yeah, like I didn't tell Aaron it was happening. Like I was so like kind of
There's shame.
ashamed that
No,
I
there's
was
shame
doing
involved.
this as this pelvic floor PT. Like I should have a stronger pelvic floor. And I don't think anyone at that point could probably not leak. I don't know, maybe. But now I'm at week 5. I'm not coughing quite as much. I finally saw a naturopath and got on even more like homeopathy and doing the hot cold contrast. And so I'm finally feel like I'm at the tail end of it. But yeah, it's been not a fun 5 weeks, I will tell you that. And now my kids have another little virus, and I'm just like scared to death that it's not gonna go away. But yeah, it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
And yeah, it kind of brings this level of shame, which I I didn't expect. Like if someone said, "Oh yeah, you're going to probably have a little bit of leaking," like yeah, totally get it. Like I'm obviously used to that with seeing patients, but yeah, it kind of hit me a little bit differently this time.
Yeah. I know, like, when I have had, like, a long extended thing and I have some linking, or sometimes I might be really have a lot of stress going on, in my life and feeling stressed out, and I am maybe sitting in a really poor position, or I'm bending over, like, this happened the other day. I have some stress going on in our household because we've had some ill parents, and it's really stressful time. And I feel like that weighs on you, and it happens in your body. You hold that stress in your body. And I was bending over to pick up the ball for the dog, and I sneezed just right as I was bending over, and I leaked a little bit. And I was like, I immediately went into a shame spiral, and I was ticked off. I was
Yeah,
like, "Nuh-uh, that is not what's happening right now."
yeah,
Like I was just like, one more thing, like, no. And because and it's interesting because I logically know
yeah,
what happened in that moment. It's not the full picture. It is some information, but it's not the full picture. And that's what I say to my clients. It's like, get the context of what's going on. And with illness, in I'll talk about illness and then I'll talk about my situation where this happened. But with illness, like, we tell people that almost to think about your from your mouth to your vagina is one big tube. I mean, obviously it goes through a lot of things, right?
right.
But it's one big tube, and the inflammation that we have in a head cold is held in all of the tissues of our body. And
Yeah,
in inflamed muscles, swollen muscles in the vaginal area, in the pelvic floor area, in the core area, inflamed muscles don't have the reaction time that a non-inflamed muscle. A swollen muscle can't contract and react as quickly or as productively
yeah,
as as a healthy muscle or an unsick muscle. And so even though it may feel like your allergies are up here, your whole body is having an inflammatory response that's making it less effective.
yeah,
And so it just starts to fatigue out. And so it's magnifying the worst case scenario of a muscle imbalance, right? It's magnifying your symptoms out of proportion to what really is going on. Is it information that is valuable? For sure. Like, obviously, my body has a limit. Everybody has a limit. So in my case, I've been holding a lot of stress, which adds up to a lot of muscle tension. And when I hold stress in my jaw, I also, like most people, hold tension in my pelvic floor. There's a part of my body that is bracing for the next traumatic thing that could happen
yeah,
and trying to anticipate it. And that tension in the small muscles of our mouth and in the small muscles of our vaginal canal changes how the coordination of those muscles in a time of stress, like a big, powerful sneeze, bent over in a collapsed position where the muscles are in their weakest position to start
Yeah.
out with. And then there's some tension there that's been going on long term. And the reason I think I went into the shame spiral is that because of the things going on in our household, I haven't been as disciplined and diligent with my
Yeah.
own self care. My own self-care kind of gets put on hold, which I think everybody listening can relate to. It, I've been prioritizing going to swim because it's such a stress reliever, but I haven't been doing my normal stretches at night, my normal breathing exercises that I tend to do, even some of the stuff I regularly do, vibration plate for bone density and some other things. So like I take those things off the list first, and
Yeah.
then when something like this happens, I'm extra mad at myself. And it's a circumstance. I can't change my circumstances completely, but it was a reminder to myself that if I'm going to be a caregiver, I have to take care of myself. I
Yeah.
have to prioritize my own stuff, or things happen.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the same thing, me and my husband were preparing for this big trip, which we haven't, left the kids before. And so I feel like there has been a little bit more stress and different things I'm having to do for the kids. And so I'm sure that kind of played into it as well. And I've never, even as a pelvic floor PT, I've never had like the craziest, strongest pelvic floor. I've always had like a pretty balanced one since I've done this work, but it's just kind of, yeah, reiterated that, even people who do this work, we still struggle with all of the things, I always tell patients, I'm pretty sure I've had every single pelvic floor and core dysfunction there is. So it makes it a little easier to relate to. And I think
Yeah.
I forgot, when patients come in and they're like, oh, I just leak a little bit. And I think we really dumb that down of like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. But like just this like one little dribble in the middle of the day, I can't go home and change. And I feel this like wetness in between my legs. It's just such a yucky kind of vulnerable feeling. And so I think really like we just need to make sure that when our patients are telling us those things like that we really truly like validate like yes that is not fun and let's work on how can we improve that you know
Yeah. Um, when you were sharing also just kind of in other, like, education classes you've gone through, how they talk about kind of the breaking point, the natural expected capacity of the pelvic floor in a longstanding illness, and, and then, what tends to happen after, and maybe also talk about, like, okay, when you get on the other side of it, it's not like everything's been ruined, right? Like,
yeah yeah
it's gonna things are going to bounce back, but I also think of I have some friends that were, like, constant vomiters when they were pregnant, and they were just like, "I would just get naked because I'm just gonna pee all over the floor every time I vomit," you
yeah
know?
yeah
And I can only do so much laundry, and stuff like that. So, I mean, like, and I would talk through some of the things with them too about, like, okay, this is a season, and yes, it is really hard on your body. One, what can people be doing during the season, even if it's not stopping the leaking? And what do we start looking at after they're on the other side of that season?
yeah
Let's talk about that.
yeah so like in the different continuing education classes I've taken basically our goal is to never leak. But so if you have a strong and balanced pelvic floor, I care more about balance than really truly truly super strong. But we shouldn't be leaking normally. But they also have commented and said that you should still really not be leaking with about like 1 week of sickness. So the common cold lasts about 6 to 7 days for the most part. With it like a normal common cold, you're coughing a little bit, you sneeze, but it's not these massive, deep coughs, it's not too terrible. You should still be able to not leak within about that week. Once it goes past a week, into that 2, 3, 4, 5 week range, leaking at that point is generally not something that you're able to control. And even if you had a super strong pelvic floor, most likely you're going to experience some type of leakage. So I think just really like making sure you understand that piece of like, okay, I'm not broken, right? Like I'm not like this crazy, I don't have this crazy weak pelvic floor where I'm going to start experiencing severe leaking soon or prolapse or other things. I'm just in this really hard phase right now. And I'm going to, once this is over, it's going to improve. Does it mean that there probably is an imbalance and a weakness there? Yes, to some degree, I think so. And so actually, since I started leaking, probably because I am a pelvic floor PT, I'm like, okay, what do I know? What things can I really work on as I'm sick, right? Like I can't change the coughing. I can change how I cough. You know, if I'm in bed, can I roll on my side really quick, sit up, get into a little better position, and then cough? Can I think about engaging my pelvic floor and core a bit before I cough, just to reduce that pressure? So those are the things like during it, but then when I'm feeling good, you know, there's periods of time where you're not going through those symptoms. And so I've been really focused on doing some breath work and really focusing on breathing, connecting to my pelvic floor and core, and trying to just give myself a ton of grace. I'm not pushing working out, which I normally would. You know, but just trying to connect to my body and trying to kind of get these muscles, hey, like I need your support right now. And so trying to just do a little bit during the sickness. And then I think starting to work on, coordinating that functionally, right? Starting to bring that back in of, do I have this reflexive pelvic floor and core? Are these muscles activating for me functionally? With a cough, technically your pelvic floor and core should be drawing in and up naturally. And that not everyone does that. And so making sure, I think that's one of the big things of, it's like my main goal, honestly, is with teaching people of, I don't want you to have to do these exercises for the rest of your life. I want to retrain these muscles to become a reflexive muscle, right? That is engaging naturally for you. So I think we just really need to be a little better about retraining that. And, you know, again, not that we are these truly broken people when we're leaking, but also that there is something to also be doing, that we shouldn't just, when we're feeling better, where the leaking goes away, did the imbalance go away? No, we just reduced the strain and the pressure that was put on it. And so it's fine for the most part, but could we still be doing some things to kind of help retrain those muscles? You know, so yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think also, you know, what I hear and what you're saying too is just having grace with yourself, giving yourself some perspective, you know, of like kind of, all right, this does tell us some information. It's not, it's not telling us all the information,
Right.
right? Um, and doing the things that you can do. It's like I kind of think of it as sometimes as like you're swimming upstream. You're still going down against, but you're not going as fast down, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and so I love what you said about on the times where I'm not coughing, I'm going to do a little bit of core work and a little bit of pelvic floor connection. And I think that that's really important too, because these muscles, like we've all probably experienced a time where our core is exhausted from how
Yeah.
much we're coughing, right? Because we're trying to get a productive cough, and our core is having to work in a really, really challenging way.
Yeah.
And so those muscles are really tired. Um, so that the nice thing about doing the breath work and the connection is it does almost kind of open up your lungs and then draw it back in. It kind of gives you a little bit of a stretch and a strengthen, a
Yeah.
stretch and a strengthen, that can be really valuable. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
you were also going to share about a client that you have, that you were just seeing, with some
Yeah.
other things that were like kind of compounding. I think that one thing to recognize is pelvic floor stuff. Like in my scenario, sometimes it's a compounded thing of multiple things going on that we notice our pelvic floor symptom, and that is just like 911, 911, 911, but there
Mhm.
really were a lot of other maybe non-emergency things that
Yeah,
all kind of compounded to turn into a 911
yeah,
situation. Yeah.
totally. Yeah, I had this patient this morning, 10 a.m., come in, and this happens a lot. I see this frequently where this kind of scenario happens, and so thought it would be worth to share. It was a patient that I saw last year for about 6 visits. She was had 4 kids in like 5 to 6 years, so pretty quick, and had a fair amount of different symptoms going on that just kind of gradually increased over time. Some hip weakness, low back pain, had prolapse sensations, incontinence, had diastasis, um, had some knee pain from trying to work out. So she had quite a few different things going on. And over 6 visits, basically kind of retaught her how to engage her pelvic floor and core, how to breathe properly. And by the end of that 6 visits, all of those symptoms were pretty much gone. And so kind of started to get her to get into a good exercise program, how to think about engaging with, lifting her kids and her lifestyle, and living on a farm, and what does that look like in terms of tending to chickens and that kind of stuff. So got her to a really great place. But over the last month, she got sick. She was on her period, and she still continued to do some working out, and was doing some weightlifting, and started noticing a little bit of some pressure and heaviness come back. And she called me within, I think, a few days of this happening, and she's like, "I'm freaking out. Like, I got to get back in. Something's going on. I must have done
911 call.
something." Right.
Yeah.
I must have done something. And so I was like, no, probably don't stress about it. It's probably okay, but sure, let's get you in. We can see where things are at. Um, and she's like, and we started talking through, and she's like, yeah, actually, I don't think it was maybe just the weightlifting. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. It was probably lots of different things. The pelvic floor is not super black and white, right? Like there's all these different layers. And so really, I feel like, it's just like all these different factors that kind of can compound it. And a lot of people are like, oh, there's no way I bent over and all of a sudden have a prolapse. I'm like, correct. You probably didn't. That prolapse was kind of stewing a little bit before then, and all these different things started to add to it. But, you cough and sneeze, we have this pressure. Then you're on your period, right? And you potentially have a tampon or cup in, and now we're changing placement of where that bladder is sitting, and more pressure on the bladder. Plus, just being on our period hormonally and blood flow wise, is really challenging. And then we're continuing to stress our body even more by exercising, or putting more load onto it by weightlifting. And so at the end of the appointment, she felt a lot better, which I was really happy about, and was like, okay, this all makes sense. And I think that's the biggest thing, is like when you start feeling some of these symptoms of like, okay, big picture, is this appropriate? Does this make sense for what I've been going through over the last couple weeks, couple
Yeah.
months, right?
Yeah.
Like with you and the stress situation, and me with coughing. Yes, those are all like things that would normally cause those symptoms. And then, okay, what can we do about it and not go into that spiral, right? Because I think it happens so easily of, oh my God, I'm broken. Oh my God. And especially if you've felt these things before, right? Like if
Right.
you have experienced leaking in the past and how long that took you to improve it, and now you're leaking again, it's like, oh my gosh, did anything I do actually help? And of course it did. And we just kind of go to those places mentally. And it's hard, even as a pelvic PT, like we experience these things. But I think it does just make us a little more human, of,
Mm.
okay, we go through things just like anybody else. And it's just a matter of, what do we do about it, and how can we maybe improve this thing for the future, but also giving us some grace of like, heck, I'm going through a little hard phase right now, like I think it's okay to, yeah.
Well, I think it all comes down to recognizing that everybody has a certain capacity. And our my cough, cough. My, my mission is to help people expand their capacity.
Yeah,
Right? That ultimately, that's what I'm looking for. If that means that I'm giving them strength that they were missing, or relieving pain that they were having, or giving them stability, or removing, you know, you know, an issue that's happening like constipation or prolapse or incontinence, we're increasing their capacity by building strength and and balancing out their body, right? But
Yeah.
in that, we have a capacity, and sometimes, you know, our hormones impact that capacity. Like it happens like, in the middle of the month, right before your period, or like perimenopausal, or I'm like that almost menopausal stage. Like the hormone component is really
Wild.
it's really wild. It's a really crazy situation, right?
Yeah.
Illness and inflammation, stress and tension, um, fatigue, how much rest you're getting, nutrition, hydration versus dehydration. I mean, so I think sometimes we think, okay, I did pelvic floor PT, I'm fixed. My
Yeah.
pelvic floor will be fine forever.
Yeah.
Um, that is not how it is. Just like if I and this is true, I sprained my ankle really bad when I was in high school, and it is good most of the time, but sometimes if I'm walking on something uneven, that's gonna be the ankle that rolls,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
and I dislocated my shoulder in college, and I still wanna swim, so I am very proactive in how I treat the capacity of my shoulder. I really listen to it, I really fortify it, I really try to work on it, and I had a six-finger wide diastasis, so I know that I can do core work and I can do some traditional core things, but I'm not going to do repetitive crunch like movements. I'm not going to
Yeah.
do repetitive pushing out of my tummy. I'm going to work on my core and be intentional about my core for the rest of my life because I had a
Yeah.
significant issue there that changed the capacity of my abdominal wall, and now I feel like my core is super strong, but it's because I'm very intentional about what I've learned about what makes my core strong. It's
Yeah.
not like my core is really strong, so I'm gonna go back to doing V-ups all day long. That
Yeah.
wouldn't make it for a strong core for me. I think the same thing happens with pelvic floor. There are so many components that are involved in these small muscles that are structural in nature, um, that we have to live in a very proactive and intentional way, not necessarily overthinking everything, but just listening to our body and recognizing there are going to be some times when you have more capacity than others,
Oh,
and
yeah.
to be gracious about that, you
Yeah.
know?
I love that term. I was just telling a patient that yesterday who is an 80-year-old with prolapse. And I told her, I'm like, you have a capacity and I'm going to try to improve that capacity. But that means if you go to a bar class, like you're using some of that capacity. So by 4 p.m., you may feel a little bit more pressure than if you were to do a little bit less intensive exercises or whatnot. But like, yeah, we have this like threshold. Same thing with like our hips and our back and our posture. And
Right.
our body just has this kind of threshold. And yeah, our goal is to keep improving that if we can. But sometimes there's medical conditions or there's enough systemic laxity where that's going to limit it. And we may not be able to really improve it a ton. And so
Right,
trying
and
to
that's
kind
when we have to acknowledge it and
of,
respect it,
yeah,
I think there's a
yeah,
difference between, like, giving up and saying, "Oh, I can never do that." No, I'm
yeah,
respecting my body's capacity, and I wanna function as best I can within these built-in limitations for my body, and it's different than your body, and it's different than somebody else's body, and we wanna so much compare to everybody out there, but the sooner you can learn what your capacity is in any given moment and respect it and work within it, the stronger you're going to be overall. And then
yeah,
that capacity grows a little bit,
yeah,
right? Because you weren't constantly like pushing past the guardrail over and over and over again,
yeah,
your body has guardrails to protect you, and everybody has a different capacity. Like your mom that had four kids and was doing all this stuff might be different than another person that has never had kids, right?
yeah, totally.
That those poor kids, I'm sorry, childbirth has an impact on your body.
Yeah.
It's It's a transformation that leaves a mark. Does it mean
And I
that you're
think too,
scarred
just like
forever?
the mental load of kids, right?
Yes.
She's like, "Am I ever gonna be able to do a 30-minute workout, like, without them?" Or without, like, having to think about it, and I was like, they take up a lot of brain space, and so when I tell you to think about engaging your pelvic floor when you take out the trash, you might be trying to make sure those 3 kids don't kill each other, and so you're not thinking about that, you're not able to think about it. So I think just the mental load too of the kids during the day, like, we also have to, like, give ourselves a little bit of a break of that's tough, right? It's tough to constantly go back to my posture, my body mechanics all day long when I'm, taking care of all
Yeah.
these different kids. So yeah, it's tricky for sure.
Yeah, and I think that that's another point to like to point out is that there are different seasons, and I talked about like you're in a season of stress, you're in a season of illness, but there are also different seasons of your life.
Yeah,
There's the childbearing seasons, there's the toddler years, there's the stress of teenagers. There's different seasons that require different things from you. I talk a lot about this when I talk about emotional capacity,
yeah,
and wanting people to have the physical strength to have the emotional capacity that they need, or the mental capacity, like people that are in college, or that are in a big learning stage in their life, or like a new job, or a really mentally challenging job, like every every system works together. And so
yeah,
when I bent over to pick up the ball for the dog, I'm like, why now? Why this? But really, there are a lot of things going on in my life that are pulling from my capacity,
yeah, for
you
sure.
know?
Yeah,
And it
100%.
it's gonna show up in some way. Maybe it shows up in I get sick because my immune system's down. Maybe it shows up in, I get injured because my cortisol levels are high, and my joints are more susceptible to a tear. Maybe it's, I leak when I bend over to pick up the dog ball. Yeah.
Yeah,
you know, like it's good. It might show up in different ways. And I feel like trying to I mean, I fully admit it. I immediately went into the shame and condemnation and
yeah,
judgment of myself role. But then I took a couple breaths, and I like circle back and come into it like with like curious, like questions, like what's really going on in my life right now? Like let's look at what's like trying to be more, you know, let's examine, let's explore what's happening here,
yeah,
as opposed to like let's just shut it down. We suck. This sucks. I
yeah,
suck. you
yeah,
know? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's so common. I feel like incontinence brings a decent amount of it, but prolapse, like, I feel like some of those people, especially if you've never experienced it before, like, you can just really go down the spiral place, and yeah, it's can feel scary, super scary.
Well, and I think and I have like this little mini series on prolapse on my membership that's called Prolapse 911, because every email that I get about prolapse, or every phone call or client reaching out about prolapse, it is an emergency situation. And
Yeah,
as therapists, we know that
it's not.
it didn't happen overnight,
Yeah,
and it is an emergency situation in the sense like if you are bleeding, you put pressure on it to stop the bleeding. If you have prolapse, you need to sit down and put your feet up
yeah, yeah,
to decrease the pressure on the prolapse. You need to lay down, get off your feet, take some breaths, get your hips up if possible, put your hips up on a pillow, let gravity do a little bit of the
yeah,
work, right? But there's multiple reasons that I feel like people have that panic response. But one of the reasons is it's an internal organ that is moving out, and there's a visceral response to that.
yeah, yeah,
Right? Your body actually becomes anxious and panics because this is danger, danger,
yeah,
This isn't where this is supposed to be.
yeah,
Um, and it's a different reaction, and I think that that is a neurological fight or flight type reaction
yeah,
that people that really reinforces. I don't see that same type of reaction with incontinence. I do
Yeah.
see the frustration and the sadness and the defeated feeling, but it's not the same as that panic,
Yeah.
anxiety feeling that comes with prolapse. Would you agree?
I agree. 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And I think too, because incontinence comes and goes, right? It's not like you're constantly leaking. But with prolapse, sometimes when you first get it or when you're in a flare, I call, there can be a constant feeling of pressure and heaviness. And that's all you can think about, right? Like you're going through your day and that's all, especially if you're a mom or you do a lot of standing or manual labor, that's all you can think about and you cannot get it to go away, and it takes time, especially if you're in a flare up or whatnot. And so I think, yeah, there's just a little bit more of like, it's just in your brain constantly.
Yeah.
And maybe people aren't as educated with what truly is a prolapse. And I think a lot of people go to Google and look at, oh my God, I'm going to have surgery. Like, and we kind of go down that road versus incontinence. There's just less of a fear there.
Well,
Or as
because
much of a fear.
there's grocery stores of incontinence products.
Yeah.
So everybody's like, well, I guess I'm like my grandma now,
Yeah. I'll put
which
that
is
on.
yeah, which is sad and inaccurate. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I see where that's at. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, I'm glad this is I feel like this was just a meant to be podcast. I know that we were planning to talk about something else and we will
I
absolutely
almost canceled it because I was like, I don't want to be coughing on a podcast, but I'm glad I didn't.
yeah, I'm so glad. Well, we'll circle back and talk about pregnancy in a future one when you're back from Italy. Um but I feel like this is a question we get a lot, and we have a lot of people like, what does this mean? And in the Pacific Northwest, probably across the country, we're moving into allergy season where people are going to all of a sudden be like, what? My pelvic floor is a hot mess.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's a timely time to talk about this.
Yeah.
I think we could also share, maybe before we close out, we could also share briefly about like things like running, jumping, trampoline when you have been fine and you feel really strong, and then you do something like you jump on a trampoline or jump off a diving board and there's that spring back and you feel things move. I feel like some of those things are also information that
Yeah.
say, oh, you don't have enough coordination, strength, maybe you were in the wrong alignment, maybe your bladder was full, maybe your capacity is low, so you used to be able to
Yeah.
jump on a trampoline, but today you couldn't. I feel like that's also a window, like, and some of those things are like saying you have a pelvic floor that can bench press, 30 pounds, but you just ask it to bench press 100 pounds,
Yeah.
and and it doesn't have that capacity yet to do 100
Yeah.
pounds. Doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
weak, it's just not 100 pounds strong.
Yeah.
What do you say to those type of things?
Yeah, so it's all stress incontinence, right? So it's basically a physics problem. The pressure coming down is greater than the support and stability we have here. And I truly feel like with diastasis, with prolapse incontinence, it's about managing pressure, right? We need a little bit of pressure, but we don't want too much, right? And once we get into the too much and then too frequently, too often, that's when we start to really get down that incontinence route. And then if we're having that incontinence and we're not really doing anything about it, sure, it's going to keep kind of continuing and gradually increase. But I think there's certain things that it can be worse than others, like a little sneeze, here and there is probably not going to be as drastic as like a box jump or double unders in a CrossFit class where we're doing 50 box jumps and then 50 double unders. And we do that every single morning without doing the pelvic floor work. That's going to look differently than what like a sneeze or cough here and there is going to look like. But it all kind of comes down to that pressure management and how coordinated are we with that pelvic floor and core. And so, because it's a really common thing, like in the CrossFit community, to leak in those WODs. And a lot of them, it's become kind of a normal thing. I still feel like it's not, like there's still ways we can manage that pressure. And so, yeah, I feel like they're all kind of in the same camp, but it's just about kind of, okay, if it was one time and you haven't experienced it again in like 3 or 4 months, something I probably wouldn't really worry about too much. But if it kind of is like, okay, it starts rearing its head more and more and more, what can I do about it? First I would, try to seek pelvic floor PT or online with Kelly or some type of, education on what's my situation and how can I go about fixing some of these things. Or just starting to pay attention to some of your posture, your alignment, your hydration habits. Like, are you eating a lot of super, bladder irritant foods? Are you, what does your self-care look like in terms of exercise and pelvic floor and core health and that kind of thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered that question fully.
No, I think it's good. It's a bigger picture as well. I think that not ignoring it, but not but getting perspective on it. Like
Not
if you're
catastrophizing
ignoring
it.
it like in box jumps and you're letting yourself leak every time you jump, well, you're just telling your body that the bladder doesn't have to hold. That's the
Yeah.
signal. That's the message you have. It doesn't have to hold for this,
Yeah.
right? But if you're on a trampoline and you bounce and you're like, "Ooh, that wasn't great. How about if I bounce and breathe differently or make sure that I'm not tucking my tail on the impact. Oh, now I can do it without the leakage." That
Yeah.
was an alignment and like understanding and correcting it.
Yeah.
But then, after 10 bounces, that's my capacity. Now it's fatigued out and I can't keep going. So I'll take a little break and maybe I'll go back to it. It's like really listening to the body and recognizing that leakage is your body communicating something's off.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
What is off? Something's not quite right. What is it? It's different than what we talked about with the cold, where it's just really just fatigue and endurance, and just we've lost all endurance over time,
Yeah.
right? Whereas exercise or certain running or certain movements, those are voluntary things that we're choosing to do, and we can modify. We can walk a little bit. We can watch, like it's worse on going downhill, so I walk down the hill and I run up the hills or something like
Yeah.
that. There's things you can do that listen to the capacity of your body and build within that capacity without constantly ignoring the symptoms. Right?
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. All right. Fun conversations about leakage. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you guys want to learn more about what Christina does, what I do, I'm gonna put stuff in the links in the show notes. The tummyteam.com. We have a lot of online resources, and Pelvic Floor Place is Christina's clinic, but she also has some online resources and works with people online as well. So you can reach out to either of us. You're not alone. We have been there. It's an ongoing journey. It's a process of understanding and loving and respecting our bodies and having grace for those moments, right?
That's right.
Yeah. All right. I'll see you next time, Christina. Bye, everybody. See you next time. Once again, thank you for joining us at the Tummy Team Journey. We would love to help you restore your core and be strong for the life you were meant to live. You can get more practical strategies at thetummyteam.com, and we'll see you next time.